stuff open here. That up. Got that where we want it. And this we want. Alright, there we go. And hopefully by now, everything is caught up as far as the stream with the capture goes. So I guess, hello. I'm EnviroBoy. This is my channel. We're going to do some writing today. You can see over my shoulder, kitties hanging out in the background. They're getting ready to do some lawn work outside. I might need to go close the window. I don't know. I don't want to because it's really comfortable with the windows open today, but there's no way that's not going to end up bothering me. There's no way my mic won't pick up that noise too. Hold on a second. I'll be back. There we go. Alright, that should make sure it doesn't become a problem. They use the world's loudest lawnmowers around here. Like, they go out of their way to do it, I'm pretty sure. So, you know, it's just one of the drawbacks of living in an apartment. Yeah, rather than owning my own property. But, you know, what are you going to do? So, yeah, okay, let's go ahead and get ourselves a stream going here, I suppose, right? There we go. So, I have D&D Beyond pulled up because we'll probably reference that at some point in time because today what I'd like to work on is some more factions. My hope is we can get at least one, preferably two more of all of the factions that are part of this world figured out. Well, part of this region of this world. So that's kind of what my hope is I can get those two more of them fleshed out, because I think if my count is proper, if we do that, then that'll leave one more faction, and then we can start talking about like major actors. Hey, human robot, how's it going? So yeah, but that way we can get the factions, and then we can start really focusing on the faction leaders. And if we can kind of get all that ironed out, then it'll be, I think, pretty easy to start thinking about what the exact nature of all the missions and goals for the players are going to be, because we'll understand sort of who all of our actors are and what their individual goals are going to be, which means we'll understand what all is happening in the world as we're writing and developing it. So that's what today's goal is, and I will inevitably come up short because that's what we do. When it comes to personal projects, I tend to overcommit and underperform, but it's a personal project, so who cares, right? Still trying to get my caffeine balance for the day in. Alright, so last time we had, well, the actual last one, I was feeling loopy in the brain because I was super tired, and so I didn't even try to embark upon anything with this actual campaign, and we just sort of made a dungeon just for funsies. But the time before that, when we were working on the actual campaign, we had worked on, I feel like my microphone keeps drifting away from my face, but I guess the capture looks like it's still picking my voice up just fine. I don't know. If anyone feels that the balance is off or I'm too quiet, just let me know and I can adjust. My microphone has been really goofy as of late, and so I'm trying to figure out. Audio's fine? Okay, cool. Then I'll stop fussing over it. My microphone is being weird as of late, and it has begun to be much quieter than it used to be, so I'm not perfectly sure what the cause is. other than it's very old and I probably need to just get an actual, at least a USB mic, if not an actual microphone set up here if I'm going to do this whole streaming thing. But, that costs money, and who has that these days, right? Ugh. But at any rate, we had worked on one of our factions. We had worked on the Leonins, who exist within these planes and worship our dragon, who's going to kind of be our sort of big bad. It's like a potential big bad, depending on how things go. And I've been kind of thinking about that, trying to decide how I'm going to balance things to, in essence, guarantee that players can have a proper big bad to a campaign in this, considering there's a very realistic possibility that they befriend and ally with the dragon itself, right? I want to offer that opportunity there, because offering that opportunity adds a lot more dynamic potential for the rest of the stuff in this campaign. So it makes things a little more complicated. But I think what I've sort of decided is going to be the way to handle that. The best way to ensure that players are going to have that satisfying big bad final encounter is by making it so that every faction's sort of head honcho, grand poobah, whatever you want to call them, is of big bad caliber. Because the idea that I have is that if they befriend the dragon, then based on their actions, one or more of those faction leaders will then sort of become their final enemy. Like, in essence, there's going to be potentially 4 big bads, all of them capable of being a campaign ender for the players if they, don't handle it properly or aren't properly prepared to combat them. And whichever one they end up fighting depends on who they build alliances with, versus who they royally piss off over the course of the campaign. And so, like, sort of an additional thought I had on that is sort of to almost plan out 2 versions of each of those leaders in those final battles. One that's a mid-tier, right, because this campaign is going to go from levels 1 to 10. So if we plan one that's like a level 7 battle, so that way it can be a mid-range sub-boss fighting any of them, and then the final boss ends up being a level 10, right? So you plan one for both of those, so you can just kind of willy-nilly wing it as the DM. And even then, it may not work. You may have to do adjustments as you're DMing, which is kind of the point of being a DM, and that's the point of doing D&D at all, as opposed to just playing, Dragon Age or whatever. But the upshot here is that I think that's kind of the solution that I've settled on, is that there are going to be multiple potential big bads, and each one of them is going to be the potential to be a big bad or a midway boss. And we're just going to plan for that and let the characters just sort of, or the players just sort of end up making their own big bad based on their actions. That's sort of the idea. So, but yeah, I want to work on the factions a bit. I want to iron out a couple more factions, probably the 2 mountain ones, the Giants and the Duragar. That's what I want to do. Hey, Yuta. Okay, what do you got? At my job, have I ever been a "you have no power here" moments? I don't know that I've ever been quite that drunk on power in my job. It's not a very good look for someone who gets paid by the taxpayers to get a little dictatorial about it. That said, there are plenty of times when people will try to talk me out of, levying a violation or something like that, when it's like, it's less of a me saying you have no power here and me going I have no power here. The law is the law, and my job is to maintain that, is to interpret that and uphold it as far as environmental law goes. Like, that's what my job is. So it's less of telling a business owner or whatever, you have no power here, and more about me saying I have no power to do anything other than, the sort of punitive measures I'm about to levy on you. I don't have any power to change it. Like, the law is the law, and if I were to not do this, I would not be doing my job. And that would really bring into question the integrity of not only myself, but the entire organization, the entire, governmental structure that we operate under, and that's just not an option. So, so I've never really been drunk on power, and it's more so I've been beholden to the power given to me, and expected of me by my station. Um, but that doesn't mean there aren't other people that take a more, as I say, dictatorial stance on things. Everyone's got their own approach to it. I tend to try and be more cooperative with facilities, just because I find that if I'm cooperative with them, they'll usually return the favor, and I have less headaches that I have to work with or work through. Um, but it's always based on the individual situation too. Um, but yeah, so let's work on some factions here. So we worked on our Golden Wind Leonins. Let's just add a page here. Go ahead and minimize that. We won't need it. Oh wait, hold up. No, we don't. We need to copy this. Copy, and then paste. And then we're just going to delete this. That way things don't get too gunked up here. There we go. Okay, so I don't know. Let's work on the Durgar. Let's do them first, and then we'll, if there's time, once we've kind of figured them out in the context of this campaign in my world. Once we figure that out, then we'll go ahead and move on to maybe the Giants. Because I kind of want to like get the mountains and just kind of work geographically along the map. Just makes it easier to keep track of what we've done and what we haven't done. So let's do, let's see, this is the High Doom Mountains. So we're going to do the High Doom, hold on, how did I spell High Doom? I didn't put one in there. Let me find it. I just want to be consistent, and when I haven't worked in a place, sometimes I forget how I went about spelling all the stuff. It's kind of hard to keep track of it all sometimes. Let's see here. Okay. 2 words. High D-U-H-M. And it's 2 words. Okay. High D-U-H-M. The High Doom Durgar. And we'll just do that. We'll call that the faction. Oh, Yuta, you got a story here. All right, let's see here. You got one where I saw an older lady calling out her host. You look very uncomfortable. Okay. Oh wow. Yeah. So she was getting all nice and prejudiced and racist about it. That's nice. Let's see. I got in the middle. I like that she would try to, at a privately owned business, try to say, I'm a customer, I pay your paychecks. It's like, if you're not a paying customer, literally, no, you don't. It's not at all how it works. It's not how at all it works. Although the thing is where you're starting with that story, of someone coming in here spewing racism and homophobia and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't set a framework for the type of person who's going to think through things particularly logically or sensibly, right? That's the kind of person who's just going to spew whatever they think they can get away with for the sake of trying to win whatever game it is that they're playing in their head, right? And that's the part that really makes it unfathomable and really not worth your time beyond just saying, get out of my store, to spend any time trying to reason with them, because whatever game they're playing in their mind is 100% incomprehensible. Yeah, I mean, if there's someone who's being abusive to your employees, I think it's a responsible thing to do to put them on like a not welcome list or a banned list or whatever options you have on that front. Like, I think that's just a responsible business ownership. You can't have a business, like you can't operate a business if someone that disruptive comes in. Good old days when we used to go to the supermarket to buy produce. I know, like I never. Who would have thought that would become the battleground for for saving society's soul. It's like, man, this is a Walmart. You come here to buy cheap knockoff versions of anything else you might want in the world, and then go home. That's what you do here. Stop picking fights. Oh man. Yeah, no, I hear you. Like, yeah. Those are the type of people. Like I say, they're the type of people who have some sort of crusade in mind. But it's a crusade that's based off of whatever imbalance is going on with them, whether it's emotional, chemical, whatever, which makes it inherently just completely incomprehensible to the rest of us. And so there's just really no point in actually trying to argue and convince them otherwise. There are some people that you just have to let go and just say, you can't be here. You are going to be who you are. And it's like, it's tragic. We want to be able to convince everyone so that everyone can be on the same page, but there are some people that just, whatever is going on in their brains is just not capable of being understood because it's not something based off of logic or reason or fact, right? There's just, those are just the way that some people are, and so those are the people that you just have to be like, you know what, leave, whatever you can do to make them leave. If you can't do anything, then you yourself leave, and, so it is a lot of words to say Karens will be Karens, but I try to not be too diminishing when discussing these things, because I think that a lot of times it's just a way to fuel the other side. That just kind of fuels the Karens. And so it's like, if you can just sort of present it with a bit more explanation, I think that offers a bit more clarity. So I always try to be as clear as possible, because at the very least, once they continue to pick a fight with me, at the very least anyone else watching could be like, no, he's the one who's sensible and logically talking through these things. He's not trying to be inflammatory about anything. But yeah. All right. So anyway, back to actually writing stuff. As much as I love trying to save the world, we're here to write some stuff. That's what people pay me $0 to do. To sit here and write D&D stuff. So let's talk about the Duragar here. So within the context of my world, with the unhinging and all of that, being sort of the catalyst that has turned this world into what it is, the way I envision the Duragar, and it's actually going to be kind of similar for the Drow, I think, up here. But we'll tackle them when we get there. But for handling the Duragar here, I think what I want to stick with is the idea that the Duragar never really existed prior to the unhinging. I mean, maybe an isolated version of someone that you might consider nowadays to be a Duragar, but for me, the concept of the Duragar is because when you think about the history, if I'm remembering my Durgar rules as written history properly, they're basically corrupted dwarves. They're a race of dwarves that have sort of committed themselves to dark magic for this, that, or the other reason, depending on which specific lore you want to ascribe to and how homebrew you're getting about it. But typically speaking, they're Duragar that have committed themselves to sort of like a dark magic in the name of power and whatnot. So I kind of want to lean into that concept, but not explicitly. To me, what seems sensible is we use the unhinging as an opportunity to be the Duragar's creation, right? So it's like when we're in our history here, right, our pre-unhinging is, I don't think there is a pre-unhinging, not in my world anyway, of what the Duragar would be like. Because pre-unhinging, they were just dwarves. To me, what happens is the dwarves are happily doing their thing. Unhinging happens. Most dwarves will flee to whatever the nearest city is, which would actually be, it would even be further north than our city here, right? Because we've got the city, but remember, this city was built as an outpost to be a midway point in this whole plotting a route endeavor. So there's Fosvik up to the north of here, which is where most of the dwarves would have fled to. And so the Duragar would be the result of those dwarves who couldn't escape and were slowly corrupted by sort of the magical radiation that exists within the mountains, right? Is sort of my imagination of where the Durgar come from. Certain villages of dwarves within the mountains that just couldn't get free for one reason or another, and so developed their own society that was slowly corrupted and twisted by the dark magic. Writing a small territory and melting your brain. The way I do it, human robot, honestly, the way I do it is just stepwise, just one piece at a time. Like, you got to give yourself permission to not always think about the entire big picture, right? Because there's so much of it. There's so much stuff that goes into it, right? And so the big trick is to not let yourself, or rather allow yourself to not always be keeping all of it in mind. That's why I say, like, today's goal is we're just going to talk about these two factions. We're just going to think about the Durgar and where they come from, and we'll think about then the giants and where they come from, and that's all we're worrying about today. Like, that's the best way to do it, is to just, like, set aside whatever time you're going to use to write that day, decide what you're going to do, and when you get it done, either move on to something else or say, like, great, I did it, and move on, right? And then trust yourself to leave those things there, and then when you work on something new, don't think about it. So, like, today we're talking about the Duragar. I am spending zero mental energy working on really anything else we've created for this campaign so far, and that's kind of it, right? Like, I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just thinking about the Duragar. And then when the time comes, once we kind of enter the editing process and start making missions, when things are going to inevitably meld together, that's when I'll think about trying to keep things cohesive and stuff like that. So it's just like one step at a time. So created 4 factions. I have a scissors, paper, stone type of alliance. So that's good. That's something good. What I would do then is, like, if you haven't already, I would make a map. That's something that you can do. Just like try and come up with discrete steps that you can do. Discrete individual things, right? So you've got your factions and you've kind of got an understanding of what their alliance is going to be. Don't worry about it anymore. Don't try and build off of that. Instead, just think about, okay, well, I know we need a map, so let's make a map, right? And so whatever tool you want to use, whether it's hand-drawn, using like I do, Wonder Draft or whatever, make a map, and then the next day it's like, okay, we've got our map and we've got our factions. Now let's put the factions on the map. And that's what you do. And you spend time just sort of thinking about that. And that's all you do. It's just you have to find ways to break it up piecewise, right? And that's why I also say, why I'm willing to take weeks on end to spend weeks on end trying to just build our random encounter tables, right? Because that's a discrete part. That's an important part, and you just do that. Okay, so yeah, so you've got your map already taken care of. Post-apocalyptic DC. Okay, so that's taken care of. Pull up a map of DC. Plot down where the factions go, and that's that. Then, next discrete step. Think about who's the leader of one faction. Don't think about anything else. Don't worry about, at that time when you're just trying to think about, oh, who's this leader and what's his deal. Don't think about, like, oh, but what do the other factions think about him? No, you'll get to that. For now, just worry about that one faction leader. How did he become that faction leader? What does he want to do with that faction? And that's it. And you just come up with discrete facts, flesh them out, and then move on to the next one. That's the best way to do it, because if you try to always think about the entire picture and try to just sort of have it all down, like the example I use is you'll run into the Hal from Malcolm in the Middle situation where he goes to change a light bulb, right? But then he finds, as he goes into the cupboard to pull out the light bulb, he finds that the shelf is crooked. So then he's like, oh crap, I got to fix this. So then like there's a squeaky door hinge or something. So then he goes to find, the oil to fix the door hinge, and then they're out of oil. So then he's going to go to the store to get more oil, and then the car brake is broken, so he goes to fix the car. And he never replaces the light bulb because he gets so focused on trying to come up with every little thing as it comes out, right? Just one thing at a time. Just fix one problem at a time, and that's all you got to do. So, okay, so you got the leader settled. Like, I'm not trying to tell you specifically what you have to do next. I'm just trying to give you ideas. Just come up with a discrete fact, right? Just whatever the next discrete thing is. Like, and make a list of everything that you need to do still, and then just pick one of those and work on it. And don't worry about the rest of it. That's the best thing you can do. That's the best way to handle it, right? That's all I'm doing when I'm here is I'm just picking one thing off the list and handling it. And then once that one's done, check it off and move on to the next thing on the list. That's all you can do, really. Because the other thing with world building, especially if you're doing it for the sake of a D&D or a tabletop RPG game, inevitably you're going to have to make edits as you're playing too, because players will come up with different things. They'll change the nature of it. They'll want to do this, that, or the other thing that's a little different than what you planned. So it's never going to be complete. So you just write down, whoops, knocking the desk here. So you just write down what you can about this one thing and then move on and don't worry about it. So that's the best suggestion I can offer. And that's because that's all that I'm doing is just one little bit at a time. You know, it's the Bob Ross approach to things. When he's painting a tree, he doesn't worry about the water or the rocks or anything like that. He just works on painting that tree. And once that tree is done, he moves on to the next thing. That's all you can do. That's all you can do. So for these Duragar, pre-unhinging, don't really have anything, right? And that's kind of that's what it's going to be. So I'm just going to put down a little note about that. Prior to the unhinging, there were no Duragar. Let's see here. Am I getting disconnected? Hold on. Cutting in and out. It might be, I wonder if it's something to do with my microphone. Because I don't see any issues with my internet connection. I don't know. I'm going to keep powering forward. If it keeps happening, let me know. If it keeps happening, let me know, and I can, like, refresh the stream or something like that. But according to my metrics, I don't see anything. Let me just check my Wi-Fi, make sure that's good. Okay. Yeah, Wi-Fi is strong. I'm not getting any frame drops, so I don't think it's my encoder or anything. I wonder if it's the microphone too. Let me know if it's just the audio, like just my audio that's cutting out, or if it's like the entire stream, right? Because those are different issues. Like if it's just me speaking, but the music and the video are still good, then we got a microphone issue. But if it's like the whole thing, then I might need to edit my or refresh my stream or something. But I'm gonna keep powering forward for the moment. But let's see here. So we got prior to the unhinging, there were no Duragar. The Duragar are the result of dwarves who were trapped in the mountains during the unhinging, slowly becoming corrupted by the magical influences resulting from the unhinging. And that's all we're going to do. Like, we're just going to put a little note in there so that we have that to come back on. So now post-unhinging, this is where things can get a little different. Okay, yeah, maybe it could be. It could be on your end. Try refreshing and coming back and see if that changes it. Or if anyone else is noticing any issues too, speak up. Just because I want to make sure that my stream is good quality. So, but yeah, okay, so post-unhinging. So this is kind of where the modern history of everything goes. So this is where we can get a bit more narrative with everything. We can get a bit more, tell a story. And this is all stuff that may never actually come up during a session, but it's handy to have. Because a lot of times players will want to understand, and they'll try to have, especially if you have a player who's got a character that's more bookish, right? More of a bookworm. They might have their character try to gain an edge up in some way, shape, or form by doing research. And so if you have an understanding of what types of history exists for any given faction, you'll be able to give them an idea of, if they do try to research, how should they go about that? What kind of information can they learn? How will it be useful, right? It gives you just sort of like a well to dip into if you need to start ad-libbing a little bit, which is, boy, is that a common thing when playing D&D. So for these guys, what's interesting, though, is because this is all going to be post-unhinging, there's not going to be a whole lot of research for players to gain as far as in society, go to the library and learn about stuff. But there's a lot of history that they could maybe learn about the Duragar based on what kind of sneaking and like sneaking around and investigating they do while in the mountains. So let's go ahead and make sure we flesh this out a little bit. So so let's see here. I'm just gonna add. I think what I'm gonna do is talk about right when it happens. So in the early days of the unhinging, and we'll go ahead and add the flavor of the High Doom mountains. Let's see. Early days of the unhinging, the High Doom mountains swiftly became a treacherous place to be. Actually, what I'm going to say, the tunnels of the High Doom mountains. The enclosed walls served as a veritable pressure cooker of magical calamity. Let's see here. Cave-ins occurred daily, cutting off travel routes and crushing cities under the weight of the mountains. Boom. Hey, Petrosa, how's it going? Good to see you here. Let's see here. Cave-in daily, cutting off travel routes. Many dwarves understood the dangers of staying put and fled as soon as they could to the northern city of Fosvik. I think Fosvik is just spelled that way. I don't know. I don't remember. Let's see here. Fosvik. But not all were as wise or fortunate to escape the mountains. Boom. Alright, so that gives us our little sort of expose. Let's see, Petrosi did a bit of DMing Saturday. Won't be doing that again for a while. Oh, God. Hopefully that doesn't mean it was a horrible experience for you. That's not the reaction you want to hear from your DM as soon as the session is over. All right. Let's see here. So, let's see here. Those that weren't crushed often found their normal exit routes blocked. Those with the least luck found all exits blocked. And some were simply too stupid or stubborn to leave when they had the chance. But the unhinging had no regard for the reason, and soon the intense magic flowing through the caverns from the numerous tears that opened. Sorry, I just noticed. Opened. So soon the intense magic flowing through the caverns, not the cavers, the caverns, from the numerous tears that opened, began to corrupt the beings trapped inside. Boom, just do that. Alright. Not all of the entombed, yeah, we can do like entombed. Add sort of that ominous flavor to it. Not all of the entombed dwarves survived such intense magical influence. But those that did began to change. Let's see here. Dark thoughts and desires took a hold of their waning sanity, and let's see here, and convinced them to follow terrible ideas and goals. Let's see here. They became obsessed with harnessing the magic that filled the tunnels. I'm just kind of riffing at this point in time, just kind of stream of consciousness here. But it's like I'm constantly saying that's your starting point, right? Is to just plaster it all out there and then edit and refine it as you need to eventually result in sort of the final vision that you're looking for. So it's all a process. So if anyone's wondering, why I'm coming up with things that I'm coming up with, if there is anything, other than just my idea of that's what these guys are, as far as the narrative, I'm not really thinking too much about, where I want the narrative to go or anything. I'm just kind of spewing it all out there, trying to add a bit of flowery language in case I ever have to read parts of this off for my players for the sake of providing them history. And then trusting that if something needs to be edited, I'll take care of that when the time comes. So that's all we're working on right now. Like I say, just sort of a stream of consciousness. Write it all down, just all over the page, and then clean it up later. Became obsessed with harnessing the magic that filled the tunnels and using it to grow a society that would overshadow even the grandest parts of dwarven history. And I mean, that's kind of all that we really need as far as this faction goes, right? We don't necessarily need a whole lot more about the faction, because the faction never really, because something like just the race of the Duragar, right? A corrupted race of people. It's not like they came together and have a storied history of trying to decide on what their goals were, right? These are people that were trapped and forced into these creatures. Like, they're corrupted, forced to be insane by just the crazy, bizarro magic that exists in this world. So it's not like we really need to give them a big, long, storied history. In the scope of this whole world, their history is pretty recent, right? And so it's not like there's going to be the same encyclopedic levels of just like volumes and volumes and volumes of potential history that exist for this, that, or the other, race or faction that might exist in this world. For these guys, they're just new, and all they are is just dwarves that got messed up by this magical radiation and are now just kind of really angry people that are trying to take over the mountains and then eventually the world. That's kind of all it is. There doesn't need a whole lot more. I guess we can add a little bit. Over the years, we can just kind of add a little bit of like cohesion to everything. So over the years, the corrupted dwarves. Let's see here. I don't really want to use the word coagulated. That's a little too, I don't know, medical. There's corrupted dwarves congregated. That's a better word. Congregated. And reestablished. So we need to do reestablished new societies upon the foundations of what the dwarves had painstakingly built and unceremoniously left behind. Let's see here. Oh, sweet, you guys, we got another follow bot. Look at this. Guys, I can become famous. It's time for me to ditch out on all you suckers. I'm going to be famous. Hold on. Let me take care of this. I levy the ban hammer. Ba-boom. None of that shit. None of that shit. If I wanted to be famous, I'd just get on OnlyFans and show people all of my deepest, darkest areas. That's the modern way, and that's not the way I'm doing it. Anywho, over the years, sharp contrast and topic to what we're actually working on here for the stream. Oh boy, that'll take the wind out of your sails. All right. Over the years, the corrupted dwarves congregated and reestablished new societies upon the foundations of what the dwarves had painstakingly built and unceremoniously left behind. They grew as a new race and crowned, or that's not it. The end. They grew as a new race and named themselves the Durgar. I don't know, we'll just leave it blank like that. It's whatever. They crowned a king to lead them through their work of reclaiming and building over what the dwarves had left behind. I don't know. Today, they are strong, though still unknown to, yeah, this is what we want to do. Now, see, here's where, like, you know, like I say, just focusing on one thing is perfectly fine because it'll eventually lead to new ideas that you can then use to expand. Because just on this sort of spewing out a stream of consciousness thing, right, we have, I'm getting an idea here. So they're strong, though still unknown to the world at large, having never yet ventured from the depths of the abandoned tunnels. Let's see, they go about their work going through the effort of remaining isolated until the time comes that they are ready to, I don't know, impose their will upon the lands beyond the mountain range. Only the giants who can hear the tunneling coming from the depths of the mountains below them, and the drow who seek to claim the claim the tunnels for themselves know anything of the existence and actions of the Duragar. Boom. And we just leave it like that. There it is. I think that's all we need, really. I think that covers what I'm after here. Hold on a second. Let's see what's going on here. Okay. Sorry. All right. Yeah, I think that does a pretty good job of giving us a history for these Duragar. As far as leadership, I haven't thought too much about it yet, and I actually don't even really want to work on that today. Today's discrete things are just thinking about the histories and the existences of these factions. is really what I want to focus on today. You know, going back to the advice I was given, giving earlier today. Just come up with discrete. You know, if you're feeling overwhelmed and confused by how to approach this whole world building thing, just come up with discrete things, right? Just discrete individual items to fill out. Today's items are the history of a couple factions, you know, and then if we finish that, we'll graduate and move on to adding something else, right? And that's why, and so this is kind of why I find having made all these templates for myself to be one of the most helpful things I've ever done for my own writing, because it's like creating a checklist for myself, right? I've got this template of everything that I know I want to be able to have ready to go for any given faction, character, mission, dungeon, whatever it is. If you have that template that'll remind you to fill everything else, that can serve as your checklist, right? It's not actually a checklist. I don't put checks on there, but for all intents and purposes, these two little check marks, right, the post-unhinging and pre-unhinging histories, those are checked off, and I can tell that because they're filled in. This hasn't been filled in yet, so I know that it's like, okay, there's nothing to fill in here, or there's nothing done here, so I still have stuff to fill in, right? And so even if I come back later, you know, I can still have an idea of what I've done and what I still have to do. So that's, you know, again, that's just kind of the idea of how to break things down and make sure it doesn't become too overwhelming. Because I definitely have fallen victim to, you know, the idea of my own ideas being too overwhelming for me to keep track of, right? Because you get this flood of ideas, and then you kind of get overrun with this feeling of, oh, there's so much to do. Where do I even start? How do I go about this? And then you get that sort of analysis paralysis type of situation that you really want to avoid. And so this is the best way I found to do it. Not saying that's the only way to do it, but anyone who's going to ask my advice on how to avoid that sort of creative block up, this is it. And one of these days I will have time. I really do. It's been asked of me, and I really do want to provide it for people. I'll figure out how to create and share publicly a OneNote notebook, so that way I can just like share a notebook that has all of my templates and then eventually all of this campaign that I'm working on making. One day it will happen. It's, you know, finishing that little project is at the mercy of when I have free time, which is, there's not a lot of it. So it's, you know, I don't have much free time, and oftentimes that free time gets filled up with friends and family, you know, which is part of the reason why I insist on doing everything on my stream for free, because I know I cannot commit the time necessary to actually properly uphold the responsibilities that I feel would come with charging you guys to watch me just sit here and write stuff, right? So that's why I'm keeping this all free, because I know I can't really commit. But the flip side of it is I know it's been asked, people want it, I know it's coming. It'll come. You just got to be patient with me. And that's that. But I don't know. That little tangent aside. We've mentioned both the Giants and the Drow here, and actually considering how little time that ended up taking, I have a faint glimmer of hope that we might actually get through both of the remaining factions. So, I'm gonna get on it here and try it again. That's right. Thank you for your faith in me, Prince John. I appreciate you. Oh wait, hold on. No, I want to delete that. I need to copy that, and then paste. There we go. And then we can minimize that. So, let's see here. If I'm remembering my own world properly, this is the Siski Forest. And so, just like we named our Duragar, our High Doom Duragar, I think I want to, if we're going to be working on... oh, wait, hold on. I wanted to do the Giants first. Yes, we'll do the Giants first, and then we'll do the Drow. The Giants will actually take a bit more time, so maybe it's a good time to tackle them, and then with whatever time is left, we can do the Drow. I mean, just to finish my thought, the Drow will be called the Siski Forest Drow. Just name them, because they're not really a faction. They're just like a race of individuals that have kind of popped up. Same with the Giants here, because the Giants aren't like a cult or anything like that. Rather than giving them some fancy title, they're just going to be the High Doom. I'm going to say the High Doom Giant Collective here, because the truth is, I think I am going to stick with sort of generalized, and this is even beyond D&D. This is just sort of general fantasy lore, where giants tend to be very tribal, and they tend to not always get on very well. And I kind of want to stick with that. So I'm going to call them the High Doom Giant Collective, because I don't want to create a faction page for each individual tribe of the giants. Because while they're important for this particular campaign that we're working on, in the grand scheme of this world, I don't think they're important enough to warrant an entire collection of individual histories for each and every tribe. I think that it'll be sufficient for these guys to just say, there's a bunch of different tribes, and so you're going to have to navigate that. Because the other thing about it, too, is when I think about the giants and these tribes, I don't think about them as necessarily being intelligent, or maybe it's not even intelligent, but just not concerned enough with tribal heritage so as to make it so that a tribe will remain some extremely discrete, isolated, independent thing for centuries upon centuries. To me, the concept of the tribes of giants are more about whoever's the strongest, or who feels like they're the strongest, will say, I'm making my tribe. Anyone who wants to follow me can come follow me. Anyone else, screw you. Right, and so they go and do that, and then you've got these tribes that will be under that one guy for a while until either they get in a war with another tribe that wipes out that individual, and that, or or someone comes in and tries to usurp and all that kind of stuff. So it's like tribes are a very fluid thing. Exactly, Prince John. Absolutely. So that's kind of they're just a very fluid thing. So I think just one page to discuss the giants within the mountains is sufficient. Phaelire, how advanced is this current society we're working on? So it depends on which part of the society. If you're talking about just the giant society, not very. The giants, as far as I see them in my world, are intelligent enough to have tribal structures, but they're very very caveman-esque in their level of wisdom. It's like they're intelligent enough to survive and have societal sort of rules, but not wise in any way, shape, or form. They're very instinctive, reactionary beings. So it's like there's intelligence there, but like mostly in the way of being able to like think about the best way to kill each other. As far as the rest of society goes, within established cities, advanced enough to have, I always imagine, if advanced enough to reasonably have sort of like that steampunky, gnomish, gearworks type of technology, artificer type of technologies and stuff like that. But then leaving the established cities, there might have once been sort of that level of advancement worldwide, but the unhinging kind of stoppered that pretty quick. And so it's like within the cities you can experience and enjoy a fairly reasonable amount of technological advancement as far as high fantasy types of societies go. But as soon as you exit that, you're in a very rustic scenario of, like you're reliant upon what you can carry in your pack and the sword and bow and arrow that you have on your hip, right? And it's like you're not going to find anything much more advanced beyond that, So it's like if we're thinking about societies within the cities, I always imagine them to the point where they don't have like plumbing or anything, but they have established and kind of, at least within the wealthier parts of it, understood the concept of irrigation, right? And like they can use that so that people understand like, oh, put your waste in the waste irrigation, sewers, quote unquote, that go through the city, right? Like they'll have those types of concepts in order for the wealthy, but for the most part, it's a high fantasy type of society that we're kind of largely working on. But for the giants, no, they don't. They're like their society is about as advanced as hamsters, right? Like they know they've got their pooping corner that they stick to all of their waste goes in, and that's different from their eating corner. And it's like that's a pretty clean tribe when you've got one that sort of everyone adheres to that. It's like bathing is something that accidentally happens when it's raining. Um, that's what we're talking about with the giants here. So it's like they have language, but it's very simplistic. It's very adjective heavy, like in the sense of like they don't have connecting words. They don't have poetry. We have me eat little man, and that's kind of where I'm going with the giants, I think. Um, and a lot of that too is I always imagine a lot of that is just because of there hasn't been much of a necessity for them to go beyond that, right? Like when you think about just sort of what breeds progress, it's usually necessity, right? It's usually necessity that breeds evolution and progress of technology and stuff like that, progress of society, the need to find better ways to survive. And the fact is, the giants don't really have any natural predators, so they've not really needed to go beyond, make club, smash little man, and eat bones. So it's just like, why fundamentally change your society when what you have works, right? Eventually, humans have eventually gotten to a point now where we're more than happy to advance things just for the sake of doing it. But even then, one might argue we do it because we're intelligent enough to get bored, and so we need things to entertain ourselves, right? But if the giants haven't ever really gone past that, then if they're not bored with the concept of hunting goats on the mountains, and then call it good. So the next society we're going to work on after this, it's just like after this one, we're probably going to work on the drow. I don't know. It's just kind of fluid. Like I always talk about, we're kind of in the stage of just sort of stream of consciousness plastered all over the ground or all over the page, and then we edit it and refine it as we go. But and the thing is too is to keep in mind we're working in a world that I have been working on for years and years, right? So I've got a pretty clear established idea of what any given city looks like. For the sake of this campaign, it's more about coming up with the specific details that would be necessary for a campaign within this specific region. So it's like the idea is kind of what you can do is if you're interested in participating and helping me figure stuff out, we're working on the history, which is something that I have thought less about for most of these. I have a clearer picture in my brain of what the present looks like for them, but kind of coming up with histories about how they came to be are things that are much more up in the air. So that's kind of what we're working on right now. So for for our giants here, pre-unhinging, the giants have definitely existed. And I always like the concept of the lore of them being sort of some of the most ancient beings within this land, and that they've just kind of always been around, and that they were sort of created by the gods and all that kind of stuff. I kind of like that, and so I'm trying to think about what type of story would explain why they're in the mountains, where they came to be, and all that kind of stuff. And I think actually what I want to do to start that off is I'm just going to go into here, and we're just going to see what kind of information we can find, rules as written, to kind of understand sort of where giants come from. And so it's giving us all of our things. I'm wondering if they have a page that just discusses giants as more of a race or something like that. Yeah, they're just going to... Let's just go ahead and check out frost giants or something, right? Let's just see kind of what it talks about with them for a little bit, and just see what it kind of offers us, and see what kind of inspiration we can get from it, right? Because it's all just kind of coming up with inspiration to kind of fill in some blanks as we need to. So creatures of ice and snow with hair and beards, pale white, yada 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 yada. Giant reavers from the freezing lands beyond civilization. Frost giants are fierce, hardy warriors. survive on the spoils of their raids and pillaging. They respect only brute strength and scale in battle. Yeah, we've kind of already talked about that, and that's pretty set in stone. So your war horns, frost giants howl as they march from their fierce. That's good flavor. Inns and taverns suffer the brunt of the damage. Cellars gutted. Their casks and ale and mead gone. These are rulers of might. Make war not goods. Yeah, that's just all kind of talking about the present of giants. Not really talking about where they come from here. So the world's really our oyster. You know, or the history is our oyster. We can really just do whatever we want with them. So what interests me is the concept of pretty much what the way I always think about almost any race within this world. There's sort of two general origins that I imagine them coming from. Either a god from some ethereal plane decided to make their own race just as part of, just for shits and giggles, essentially, or the race was born of some sort of magical influence on an existing race. So when I think about giants, I almost think about the options. I guess what I'm thinking about here now is the options are either they were their own thing that were created, or I think it would be an interesting bit of lore for the giants and the Goliaths to be pretty intertwined. So I actually want to look at our Goliaths here and refresh my memory on sort of the history as provided of the Goliaths. And because it's been a while since I thought about Goliaths as a race, to be perfectly honest. But I kind of imagine them as being of the same vein, almost like a stepping stone between humans and giants. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we can work that into sort of some interesting lore for this homebrew world that isn't afraid to sidestep rules as written, really, is what it is. So let's see here. At the highest mountain peaks far above the slopes where trees grow and where the air is thin and the frigid winds howl, dwell the reclusive Goliaths. Few folk can claim to have seen a Goliath. Fewer still can claim friendship with them. Goliaths wander a bleak realm of rock, wind, and cold. Their bodies look as if they are carved from mountain stone, give them great physical power. Their spirits take after wandering wind, making them nomads from peak to peak. Their hearts are infused with cold regard for their frigid realm, leaving each Goliath with the responsibility to earn a place in the tribe or die trying. Okay, I mean, that's about on par with what we've thought about here. Every day brings a new challenge for the Goliath. Food, water, and shelter. Yeah, we covered that. Fair place, rival, Goliath names. Yeah, it doesn't really talk about what their history is or where they would have come from. So, again, I think we can just kind of have some fun with it. So here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I would think would be interesting as sort of a bit of history, right? And this could be kind of an interesting thing. And actually we could... I'm wondering if there's... All right, well, let's start with this. I think I'm going to start with the giants having been originally created by the gods as an effort to make the most imposing creatures that can be, right? And I'm sure there's some lore as written, both in the world of D&D and outside of it that could really give us some good ideas about a history of which gods would impact or be part of the creation of the giants and stuff like that. And I know there's a lot of like Norse mythology that could really offer some interesting insights into giants and stuff. But in the name of sticking to my own advice and sticking with discrete things, I'm not going to let myself worry about that kind of stuff. I'm not going to sit here and try and fuss over the details of that. That's stuff that can be edited later and added in later as needed. So instead, what I'm just going to talk about for this, so for a pre-unhinging, we're just going to say the giants as a race were the creation of multiple gods who came together in a cooperative project to create the most imposing most imposing and powerful mortals within Zaoria, which is the name of the Earth or the planet that I am creating here. So let's see here. Let's see here. They were placed upon the mountains. Let's see here, and gifted with the resilience needed. I think it's because I missed an L in there. Oh no, whatever. Gifted with the mountains and gifted with the resilience needed to survive such harsh and isolated climates. This was done so that they could be influenced and altered by the gods as they desired, without risk of damaging or influencing the other mortal societies of the land. So it's like, so the idea is that there were already existing races and societies in Zaoria, and so the gods were then like, one day a few of them were like, hey, what if we made something that's like literally the most powerful being that can, you know, safely and stably exist on in the mortal plane. And all of them, you know, who were just like, you know, drinking buddies together were like, dude, that sounds awesome. And so they started doing that. But they didn't want to damage what else already existed, right? You know, maybe they were at least altruistic enough to say like, hey, if we're going to do this experiment, you know, if we're trying to make the most powerful creation, in case we mess up and create something that is just like horribly, you know, horribly inclined towards conquest and crusade, you know, at the very least we can isolate them so that way they don't destroy what already exists. And so they put them on top of the mountains, you know, making them too big to go into the mountains to disturb the dwarves that like to live within the mountains, and just put them on mountain peaks, right, and started experimenting with that. Is sort of the idea that I am thinking of here, right? And so that's just kind of where they came to be. In the early centuries of their existence. Oh, here's a fun idea. Okay, in the earlier centuries of their existence, the giants were subject to many different experiments by the gods. These experiments are what resulted in the many different existing types of giants, and then in parentheses, storm giants, frost giants, etc. So basically the giants are the result of the gods playing mech warrior on the mountains, is essentially what it is. Some of them are like, oh, what if we gave them like ice powers? And one of them was like, what if we gave them like the storm powers? And like, that's just what they're born of. I already really like this origin story. Let's see here. Truly, they were the action figures of the gods. Let's see here. Made to be simple and powerful, the giants felt little need to expand beyond their homes in the mountain peaks, nor did they hunger for conquest beyond competing with one another for let's say for dominion over one peak or another. So it's like the tribes maybe it's like the tribes will establish like this peak is their home, and so it's like that's where that tribe stays, and they don't really venture out unless it's for conquest or something like that. I kind of want to put a footnote in here because I almost feel like what would be interesting is, let's see here, in this time through experiments and natural, through experiments of the gods and natural drift through mortal reproduction, we'll say, put it delicately, reproduction. Many giants were born relatively small of stature. These, quote, runts were often forced out of their tribes and left to fend for themselves on the mountains. Mountains. Oh my goodness gracious. Mountains. There we go. These runts would often congregate themselves and form their own tribes that lived within the mountainous valleys. Let's see here. And formed their own tribes and lived within the mountainous valleys. Eventually, they became known as the Goliaths and earned general acceptance among the other races of the world. And we'll just do that. And I'm not going to put out any more history on Goliath because we're talking about giants, but like that's kind of an interesting little tidbit, and we can use that as a seed for the origin story of Goliaths within this world as well. And so that's just like a fun little something or other that we can have there. Meanwhile, eventually, the gods grew bored with their experiments. Hold on. Experiments. There it is. Bored with their experiments, recognizing that while fun at first, creating the most powerful beings didn't have much value if such beings would never be given the freedom or autonomy to be set loose on the rest of the world. Let's see here. As the gods forgot about the giants continued their lives, fighting for glory among and between tribes, and caring little for the events of the rest of the world. There we go. Let's see here. Let's say the giants did not grow or change as they had no need to. Feeling no pressure from the outside world to adapt further in the name of survival. Boom, there we go. And so I think that's pretty much all we need for a pre-unhinging, right? We've established where they came from. We kind of offered up a fun little Easter egg tidbit about maybe the giants being the origin of the Goliaths within this homebrew world, right? And then it just established like, yep, and that's just kind of what they did for the longest time. And so I think that then brings us to a good place to work on our unhinging and beyond history for these guys, which I've kind of come up, through this discussing them as being experimental creations from the gods. I think I know exactly what their place is in the world during and post unhinging. So the unhinging occurred. The giants hardly noticed. Let's see here. Imbued with a particular resistance to magical effects. Let's see here. The magic that radiated from interplanar tears and wreaked. Hold on. Wrecked? I don't know. And I don't know. Tears and caused caused havoc among the other races of Zeoria. Zeoria, there it is. Wow, Zeoria. Let's see here. Imbued with particular resistance to magical effects, the magic that radiated from tears had little effect on the giants. And all, let's see here, and all, I don't want the and there, all monstrosities of any size or shape served as, let's see here, no, not served, all monstrosities of any size or shape were of little threat to the giants. The giants simply saw them as new prey to kill among the mountains, right? So it's just like establishing this picture of the giants were just like, oh, all right, now instead of just killing billy goats among the mountains, we also have to kill these weird ass giant spiders that have human faces. And they're just kind of like, whatever, and they just keep going about their business because they're giants and they just don't care. In effect, the unhinging did not bother them. To this day, the giants remain among the mountain peaks, serving as one of the few bastions, or no, I don't really want to say bastions, serving as one of the few pockets of land, I don't know, of life, let's just say that, the few pockets of life that truly resembles what it was before the unhinging. Not that the giants are aware of their unique status in this new world. Boom. To them, life is simply a day-to-day challenge to survive and take glory, often by force, for themselves and or the tribe. Boom. And that's all we really need to do, right? So these guys are almost the opposite of the Duragar, right? Where it's like the Duragar didn't exist prior to the unhinging, and then like the Durgar didn't exist prior to the unhinging, and then the unhinging was their catalyst for existence. Meanwhile, the giants are almost the opposite, where it's like, all of their growth happened pre-unhinging. And then the unhinging happens, and they're just completely unaffected by it. Gandhi, what do you got? I feel the giants and Mustangs would make excellent stoic philosophers. They could. Yeah. If you have them be a brand of giants that are particularly intelligent and insightful, they certainly could. Within my world, they're a bit more barbaric in nature, so I would never give them philosophers, other than like sort of the comic relief situation that like, you know, movies and TV love to use as a trope, where it's like the most simple-minded character is the one that offers the insights, just because they don't get muddled down by existing, you know, by the complexities of life, you know. So it's like I could see them almost serving like that, but the way I'm having the giants exist within this world, they're much too violent for that kind of stuff. Like, there's not a whole lot of wisdom in what they say, because their wisdom amounts to smash the things that I don't like or don't understand. And it's like, I don't know. I would say that that's not a particularly wise approach to life. Man, confused to say, man who go through airport turnstile sideways is going to Bangkok. That's a classic one. That right there is a classic. Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't perceive the giants as being particularly wise. They're the type of wise that someone who they themselves don't have much wisdom to offer might find wise, right? Someone who in the first place doesn't have much complexity going on in their brain might find the simplistic outlooks on lives of the giants to be a refreshing take on things. But this is just my homebrew world too. That's the thing. You know, I'm streaming the building process of my homebrew world. So anyone who has any other ideas, like, you definitely should follow those and not stick yourself to my goofy imagination for it all. But yeah, I don't know if I need a whole lot else for the giants, quite frankly. They exist. I might offer up. Let's try this. Let's see here. Often by. Let's see here. For the tribe. Many tribes will exist at any given tribe, but when asked, the giants will not provide. Snow, I had it right the first time. Provide storied histories of their tribes, as the composition and leadership of any tribe can change many times per generation. Excuse me, I apologize. Can change many times per generation, depending on the conquests and strengths of any given tribal head. Tribes are a fluid concept to the giants, where minions. I don't know if I want to use the word minions. Where not constituents. Constituents is a little too, I don't know, democratic for for giants. A little too democracy for the way giants do things. I guess subjects. Where subjects follow the strongest among the strongest among them, switching allegiances with. Oh, hold on! Wow, I butchered that word. I'm just gonna freaking allegiances without question. Follow the strongest among them, switching allegiances without question, as tribal heads are killed and replaced. Boom! There we go. let's see here. These giants, for any oral history they have that does exist, is very much era epic based. Summer of good hunting, frozen winter storm. Yeah, exactly. They're very like, any given tribe might have that one particularly old giant who then sort of defaults to being the tribal storyteller and says, in the time of this, that, or the other thing. But even then, it's like, it doesn't expand. Like, I don't ever envision it expanding beyond, at least any definitive history expanding beyond, the current oldest generation, right? Because it's like they would have their lore of like giants came from sky and claimed mountain peaks, none could defeat them, right? It's like their sort of generalized origin stories, and then anything beyond that is like, when I was child, so and so was tribal leader. Then he had arms ripped off and shoved down throat, and so became leader. And then he was impaled 7 times, and then so-and-so became leader, right? And it's like, that's what the tribal history is. Just sort of whatever the collective is, like the oldest member, whether they're the leader or not, just like sharing what happened. But, hey, E932, how's it going? Should be an order of scribes and historians who tried to write down the history after getting conflicting stories from every single tribe. So, yeah, I've thought about that. But my thing is like, so within my world, again, where we've got the unhinging, where that was sort of a reset point, like in some old archives, there might exist some efforts to do that. But for the most part, the way I always imagine it is within this world, the people just kind of left the giants alone. They're like, yep, the giants are up there. You can try and go learn the history, but there's about a 70-30 chance that you'll get smushed versus making it home. So, like, do it if you want. But for the most part, the giants up there, they just do their thing, and they don't really come down from the mountains. So, exactly, live and let live. So it's like there might be a little bit of history to the giants. But even then, it's like, like you say, conflicting stories. I think that would definitely happen. And it's not even necessarily conflicting stories, but it's just like, any history beyond the current oldest living generation is kind of just like, it defaults back to giants come from the gods. Maybe it's like once worshipped sun, but then sun forsake the giants in the great cold times or whatever, something like that. Where it's just like, to anyone who isn't a giant, it's just extremely nonsensical and not really worth the time to try and decipher. Because it really only exists for the giants for the sake of, like, presenting glory to the current tribal head by demonstrating all of the chain of leaders that he is the current strongest among the continuing sort of tale of usurpations and whatnot. So it's like, they're very simple. They're very simple. Exactly. Giants came to this world as creation. The first giant ever was me, as I am the oldest giant. I was, it's like, that's just the nature of them. Like, they're just, and it's not even necessarily that they're stupid, though they are kind of stupid. It's more so that they just are unconcerned about it. Giants are just very much like life is about glory. You either follow the tribal head or you prove that you are the tribal head. Other than that, you have your job, we survive, and tomorrow we do it again. And they're just very not worried about it, right? And it's like kind of, that's where I was establishing the concept of the gods intending to make them the most powerful beings, but didn't really imbue them with intelligence because they didn't want them to become this like unstoppable conquesting thing. Because it's like, I can imagine from a god's point of view, there's sort of this conflict of like, oh yeah, we could create the most powerful beings. But if the most powerful beings end up, conquering the entire planet, what's next for them to do? Well, they're going to try and conquer us, and we don't want that. So we should probably make sure we put some sort of limit on these guys that are just like ungodly strong. And so that's what they did. They made them like the biggest, strongest beings, but then made them too stupid to care about using that beyond just like, I'm king of the mountain. Like, literally, they play king of the hill. Like, that's all they do. That's the entirety of their existence. And I think there's almost something beautiful to that. You know, the Giants, there's nothing that can really touch them and stop them from doing that, other than, you know, the gods themselves or creations of the gods entirely dependent on that, right? That's why they might be in conflict with the dragons, because the dragons can kind of do it. But even then, the Giants are just like, if the dragons don't come here, I don't give a shit. Like, I've got my tribe. You know, I am the king of the tribe. What more is there in this world? And that's the Giants. And I kind of like that. I like the idea of there being something simple, especially when we're going to have Duragar, Drow, and dragons all being perfectly happy to play political games and like sneaky backstab simulator 5000, right? Like, if we have already 3 factions willing to do that, I think it's perfectly fine to have one faction that's just like, me no care about that, me look for food, and then me go to bed, and that's that's the end of the day. Like, I think there's something kind of refreshing about that, especially from a DM standpoint. Whenever the players are interacting with the Giants, it sounds like a nice break from things, to be perfectly honest. So, yeah, I think that works. I think that's good. So, yeah, that gives us plenty of time. Look at us. We got plenty of time. Let's go ahead and tackle our drow a little bit. So we've got, just kind of recap. Just to recap where we're at. Here's our map. Here's our region. Last week we came up with like our Leonins, our plains folk here. We've talked a little bit about the factions of the Duragar, where they come from, right? They're here. And then we've talked about the Giants, because the Duragar live under the mountains and the Giants live above the mountains. I suppose one thing that we can do is maybe add a little blurb here in the section here. As the Durgar have grown, the Giants have kept vague awareness of their actions, taking note of any seismic activity happening underfoot, and new openings in the mountains that appear as the Durgar go about their business. But beyond this awareness, the Giants remain unconcerned with the Durgar as they were with the dwarves prior to the unhinging. Oops, we only need 1V here. Let's see here. As they were prior to the unhinging. Let's see here. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Gandhian. I think the Duragar will, for the most part, be like, sure, let the Giants be up there. Because the Duragar are trying to amass their power, right? And so one of the things that's going to eventually happen, you know, I haven't been focusing too much on it today because we're just worrying about the isolated factions. But one of the things that's going to happen is there is a dragon that lives in this area. Dragons like treasure. Dwarves have large stockpiles of treasure. So the Durgar are kind of like, hey, you know, while we're trying to do our treasure things, we also are aware that there's a dragon that exists in this area. Let's just go ahead and let the Giants stay up top. Let's try and not bother them, because that'll distract the dragon and sort of add a barrier between the dragon trying to take our treasure and us trying to just do our thing here in the mountains. So no, I think that's absolutely right. Conflict only ever occurred early in the Durgar conquest efforts, when they unknowingly, oops, I missed an N, that's why when they unknowingly trespassed on giant territory while creating entry points into the mountains. those Duragar didn't survive, and the rest were content to be more cautious about where their actions led them. And we'll just add that a little bit there, just so that way we have like a little bit of notation going on there. That doesn't necessarily lock us into anything in terms of what one faction or the other is trying to accomplish within this region, right? But it does give us that sort of connection, that like mutual acknowledgement of their existence. Okay, so yes, that gives us so we've got our Leonins, we already did them. We've got our Duragar, and we've got our Giants. So now the last one to do is the Drow of the Siski Forest up here. So let's go ahead and do that. Copy our template here, and then we'll just go ahead and paste that, and then close. Oops, didn't mean to do it that way. We want to do it that way, so that way we've got more real estate on the page to work with in case we need to expand on anything. And then let's call this the Siski Forest Drow. That's kind of. So now the Drow, in my mind, the Drow are kind of the same situation as the Dwarves, where the Drow really weren't a thing prior to the unhinging. Then the unhinging happened, and it corrupted elves that couldn't escape from the sort of magical influence that happens as a result of the unhinging. I don't know. I think it seems a little convenient that it's like, oh, the two races were, born of the same way. But I always, at least in my mind, sort of view the Drow and the Duragar as just being like, I don't know, analogous to each other. Just one of them from dwarves and one of them from elves, right? And so I think that's what I want to stick with as far as this homebrew goes. I know that's not necessarily cohesive with lore as written, but it's my homebrew world, so I can do what I want. Like the Drow being a non-underground group. Next campaign, it'll be rethemed as jungle elves who live deep in the dark, constant dusk of mega jungle. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think I understand the concept of how it makes the Drow seem almost more interesting and unique from the elves for them to be underground. But to me, I agree with you. I think it's interesting for them to not just. I think it's interesting for a sort of like a corrupted, dark-spirited version of any given race, not always defaulting to from the depths of the underground underworld, right? Like I almost think that's like a cop-out, a really good way, a really good excuse for having them be sort of reclusive and isolated. But for me, I think it's interesting. I think it's more interesting to have the corruption be something that can happen regardless of where you make your home, And I think that's what makes it interesting to me. So I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. And that's kind of the the reason why I want to stray from it. Lame tropey cop-out. I mean, I don't know if I'll be as harsh to call it lame, but it's definitely a trope and it's definitely a cop-out. The one thing I always say about tropes is the reason something becomes a trope is because it's convenient and it works. Like, if it didn't work, it wouldn't be used all the time, and that's what makes it a trope. So I try to not be too harsh on tropes, but I'm kind of with you. It's fun to branch it out a little bit and make it a bit different. So I'm going to say the Drow are a race born of elves corrupted by the unhinging. They did not exist prior to that event, and so their history defaults to that of the woodland elves. Elves of the Siski Forest. Bada bing, bada boom. There we go. The tropes is they give you something to subvert. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. The only thing then is, but then if everyone's subverting tropes, then subverting a trope becomes a trope in and of itself, and then just cycled back to square one, and we've entered a loop, and if you follow it too far, eventually you'll get dizzy and your head will hurt. But that's almost kind of like the fun for me, just in general, analyzing like story writing tropes and techniques and stuff like that. I feel like if you analyze and overanalyze again and again, eventually you sort of will ultimately devolve into this cyclic cycle. That's redundant. This cyclic state of having tropes that lead to anti-tropes, that lead to tropes and lead to anti-tropes, and it just kind of becomes a circle, which is like both fun and exhausting. Which I then think eventually leads into ironic humor, and then it becomes its own genre of things. But it's also why I try to not worry too much about is something a trope or not, and worry more about is it compelling, is it compelling, and will it engage my players? And if the answer is yes, trope or not, great. So every story, a rewritten theme of the archetypal hero's journey. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think there have been multiple attempts that all have their own validity to sort of understanding what makes a story good, and they all kind of ultimately fall onto one of a series of existing and identified patterns, right? There are just certain basic things that are sort of necessary and unavoidable if you want to make a good, compelling story. And I think that's just born of the fact that humans like patterns. We like certain things, and certain things resonate with us, right? That's why we like music, and why all music nowadays has gotten to the point, I talked about this before the other day, why all music has sort of fallen back on the verse, chorus, bridge, chorus structure. It's because it's good, right? It's because humans like it. We like patterns. We like predictability. It helps with survival, generally speaking. If we can identify patterns in prey herds, then we can hunt more effectively and we can survive, right? Like, humans are just wired to be that way. So it's like eventually everything kind of comes back to a certain pattern, and then it just kind of turns into, are you going to be cynical about it and hate that, or are you going to accept it and just work with it? And I tend to bounce between the two. At any rate, meta discussions about story and existence aside, the Drow are going to have a pretty simple background, I think. A pretty simple history, much like the Duragar. In fact, we can almost cut and paste the Duragar one, even if we're not using the tunnels. We can almost, take the Duragar thing. But I think actually I'm going to change it a little bit. Actually, I'm going to have all of the Drow originating from one elven society is what I think I want to do. So, when the unhinging first began, most elves escaped the forest swiftly, seeking refuge in one of... Let's see, which city would they have gone to? They wouldn't have gone to Fosvik. They would have gone up here to Yusnoi over here is probably where they would go. The dwarves, I had them kind of go north to Fosvik, right? And the Drow, I think, because they exist in the Siski Forest, would probably come over to Yusnoi over there, is what I'm going to say for them in Yusnoi. However, one city of elves had the misfortune of being the site of an interplanar tear. Gosh dang it, get the com in there. Let's see here, the site of an interplanar tear. Giving them no chance to escape before falling victim to the intense magical energy that flooded the forest. The elves collectively fell to madness as the magic overwhelmed them. It's as simple as that, really. Like, that's all there is to it. Let's just say they all existed in collective psychosis, where dream and reality, or dream and where reality and nightmare became indistinguishable. As years passed and the magic slowly subsided, the elves regained their minds and senses, though these I don't know, how do I want to say that? Senses, how do I want to say this? I'm trying to add in that it's like everything was corrupted. As the years passed and the magic slowly subsided, the elves regained their minds and senses, through though corruption. Let's do that. Yeah, though corruption ran deep through both. The elves that emerged were a twisted shadow of the peaceful and wise beings they once were. They were, let's see here, they were dark in thought and desired nothing more than to spread their new existence throughout the land, turning it to their influence and making it the world of chaos they now craved. Boom. Simple as that. I think that's as simple as it needs to be, honestly. There's not a whole lot left there. They began by taking over the Siski, let's say the southern Siski forest. But soon that wasn't enough. Seeing the mountains to the south and observing the activity of the newly created Duragar people, let's see here, the drow decided that the tunnels would serve as a convenient way to travel beyond the forest without being noticed. Actually, you know what? I wanna change that a little bit. Craved. Let's say various tribes and societies among the drow began to splinter off, based on anything from religion to ideas on how to expand their conquests. The tribes would fight on occasion, coming to brief brief alliances when necessary in the name of maintaining the drow as a race. But such alliances were fragile and broke as soon as the threat subsided. The only consistent uniting factor was always their thirst to expand beyond the forest. And then we'll say they began by taking over the southern Siski forest, but soon that wasn't enough, seeing the mountains to the south. The skirmishes between the two were small and far between at first, but over the years, the tensions and conflicts have grown. The Durgar have no interest in the drow forests, but the drow insist upon taking the tunnels from the Duragar. Boom. There we go. The conflict goes on with the drow growing more and more relentless as the tribes have adopted the idea of being the first to control the mountains as the inevitable sign that their tribe is the ruling one over all drow. So it's like, it kind of gives that idea that, so like they are competing with each other, but in the same thing. So it's like there might be tense alliances. So it's like two tribes will be like, hey, we could probably take this one peak if we work together, and then, and just like kind of does that. And because that'll also give players something to work with, some angle, some leverage that they can work with, right? So I think exactly, yeah, it's competitive. I like that. But yeah, I think that's good. That gives us an idea of what to do. That kind of gives us an idea of what the general drow attitude is, so that we can start adding some specific goals and sort of understanding what their leadership would be about, So I think that's good. I think that's really good. I'm pleased with that. I don't know that I want anything else, because we mentioned at least what they're doing with the drow. And honestly, I feel like what the drow are doing with the Duragar, and I honestly think the drow don't care all that much about the giants, to be perfectly honest. I think they're like, we don't care about the peaks. We want the tunnels. The giants can be up there. We don't care. We're not going after their territory. We want the tunnels. And so they just don't really care. So they are aware of the giants, and the giants are aware of the drow, but they're all just kind of like, it's whatever. You want to be a dex-based drow paladin of conquest in this setting, because you want to become the drow king. That's a reason. It's actually a pretty good one, honestly. If I had a player that approached me with that attitude, I'd be like, fuck yeah, you do. That sounds awesome. You should do that. This one drow who is like decided that they want to do the conquest, and they want to do that. And it's like they start reaching out and they find like other allies outside of the drow, because they're like, this is a never ending competition that just isn't going anywhere. I need to find a new angle to do it. And they can just kind of take the Drist approach, and then come back as like the champion of the drow and be like, y'all bow to me now. But no, I think that'd be great. I would love that. So much. But yeah, with that done, that's actually really good. That's even more than what I had hoped to accomplish today. I'd hoped to do that for 2 of the factions, and we got it done for 3 of them, which means that we've got the general histories of all 4 factions that exist in this campaign taken care of, which puts us in a really good position to start thinking about some more details. I'm hoping maybe later this week we can work on maybe fleshing out what the sort of like faction leaders are. Although we've established a couple of them are more tribal societies, so they might have more than one leaders. We can still sort of establish who's the most dominant or the most aggressive of the leaders or something like that to provide them with that. So we can work on that later this week. Could maybe start talking about some specific mission ideas too regarding all of these, now that we understand what the factions are and what their attitudes and goals might be. So I think this puts us in a really good position to have a lot of things we can work on, a lot of different options, which is fun and exciting. So that's good. What's the level of tech like in this world setting? So when in one of the main cities, I mentioned it earlier, when within one of the established cities, technology is fairly advanced. There's like sort of clockwork and gear work type of technology, gnome tinkering, artificer type of stuff. There's basic concepts of like irrigation and things like that in farming. So the cities themselves are fairly advanced, at least in the wealthier parts of them. But as soon as you leave the cities, there's really nothing left, because there was that unhinging calamity event that sort of destroyed most of the world, except for the handful of stronghold established cities that exist in the world. Everything beyond that is gone. So it's like the players, when they're traveling, will encounter very little in the way of technology. It's very much going to be you survive based on rustic camping equipment, right? Basic tent, pack gear, food, water, and the sword and crossbow on your hip, and that's about the extent of it. But yeah, that's kind of the state of the world as it is. But looking at the time, we are at the end of the time period of what the writing stream is here today. So I am going to take myself a bit of a break before starting up my video game stream. We are playing Mass Effect 2 right now. We're working our way through that. So if you want to stick around for that, give me maybe 15 minutes just so I can grab something to drink, sort of rest my voice just for a minute. And I'll be back in about 15 minutes or so to do that. Or if you're just here for the writing, I totally understand. I'm not offended by that. You can be off and do your other stuff. So that's what's about to happen. So in the name of sort of pausing the stream, I will technically end the stream just for the sake of the VODs. It's easier than trying to edit because I'm garbage at editing. So yeah, I'll just say to those of you who have been here, tagging along, chatting with me while we're writing, I really appreciate you guys. It makes it really fun to have sort of this crowdsourced idea and discussion going on while creating these projects. I think it's tons of fun. I love hearing everyone's stories about DMing and all that kind of stuff. I think it's good fun, and so I appreciate you guys being here. If you would like to have more discussions, more in-depth discussions about different homebrewing stuff, if you want to share ideas that you have, I have a Discord. You can find the link on my channel. Feel free to join that. We'll get you verified so you can join in the conversation there. I'm hoping that it can kind of turn into just a fun little community where people are sharing their ideas and people can offer feedback on those ideas and all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in that, it's there. Other than that, the next writing stream is going to be tomorrow at around the same time. I feel like I need to check. I haven't paid attention to what my work schedule is, and my work phone is dead, so I can't check the calendar right now. But I don't think I have anything that's going to get in the way of my usual writing schedule, my stream schedule of doing Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. I try to do Saturdays, but I may or may not be available this Saturday. That's always a question mark. Depends on what else is happening in my life. But I think this week I should be around for all 4 of my writing streams. So I know I'll be around tomorrow. So so check back tomorrow if you want to see some more writing. Other than that, again, thank you so much for joining me. If you're watching the VOD after the fact too, I appreciate you guys doing that. However you watch and support, I really appreciate the support. It means a lot to me. I find it incredibly flattering that people are here and interested in what I'm working on. So I think that's really cool. I think you guys are cool people. I appreciate each and every one of you. Go out there and be cool people. Some of you I might see in 15 minutes. Some of you I might see tomorrow. Either way, I'm looking forward to it. And take care of yourselves, and I will be back shortly. So hang tight. Where's that end stream button? There it is. There's the button. Bye, everybody.